Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monica Corda. I'm the Director of Business Development for the Tech Collective, which is an IT industry association. We provide training as well as sessions like this that really give you the information that you are looking for. And we're thrilled. We've started off this project management series with Rob Massoud. He was here for 2 sessions, and now we're moving to Dr. Denise Arruda, who this is serious stuff. She has her PhD in IT project management. So for those of you who are looking for a little challenge, that would be a good thing to do. And we're very excited. We have 2 more scheduled as well. On August 12th, we'll have Moving from Concepts to Concrete with Steve Earle from HCH Enterprises. And then August 26th is an overview of project management knowledge areas with Natalie Benkovich from APSO. So what I'll do is in the chat box, I'll put both of those links for those of you who want to sign up, and then I'll also send a follow-up email with that information. We will have 1 question at the end. If you could please take your time just to answer that, just to say, like, did we meet the mark for this? Did Denise hit all of the things that you wanted to hear from today? It just helps us run better programming for you. Any questions, please put them in the chat box, and I'll help moderate as we go along. Denise will stop in some places for some questions, and then we'll answer questions at the end. So without further ado, Denise, I will turn this over to you, and we thank you very much for volunteering your time to put this together for us.
No problem at all. Some of the team challenges we have not been able to figure out how you're going to be able to see me and the slides at the same time. So we are going to opt that you're going to be able to see the slides. As Monica mentioned, we're going to stop periodically as kind of subjects or subtopics change to take questions. So I'm going to go ahead and share the presentation so that you get an idea of you get to see what I am going to be presenting. All right, are you seeing the presentation now?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
All right, I have not done this in presentation mode, so I was not aware that this has some animation to it. Great. Tip number 1, let's make sure that you test your slides. All right, so what are we going to be doing today? So I'm going to do a little bit about an introduction to myself. We're going to be talking about project management models. What are they? Why do we use them? And then we're going to talk about some of the most common models, the Waterfall, the iterative, and the Agile model. By the end of this session, I'm hoping what you walk away with is that common terminology and a little bit of an overview understanding of what these 3 models are and how that helps you in project management. What I think you're going to find out is everybody's going to go, yeah, I knew what they were, but I didn't understand what that concept was or what to call it or how to really use it in my project. So it's kind of a concept that everybody knows, just maybe not what to call it or how to use it. And then I'm also going to bring in the idea of frameworks. So what are really the differences and commonalities or the connection between models and frameworks? And I'm going to go through some of the examples on project management frameworks as well. Then we're going to go into some summary and question sessions. So if you don't get your questions as we go through the presentation, we're certainly going to leave enough time at the end so that we have an option for question and answer time at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. So who the heck am I? All right, as we mentioned, I am Dr. Denise Arruda. I had an opportunity to go for my doctorate degree from Capella University. I skipped down to the bottom there. I did get my doctorate degree in IT project management in October of 2019. I graduated with my doctorate. I am currently the Software Engineering Program Manager for Johnson Controls. My full title is Software Engineering Program Manager for Fire Suppression Products at Johnson Controls. It is too long to even fit on my business card. But basically what this means is I am the program manager for all of these software programs that fall under fire suppression products. And so I deal with not just individual projects, but a program is an umbrella of projects that have something in common. In our cases, we look at things by business unit. So I run programs and projects for 3 different business units. So I have over 30 years experience in IT industry. I started out as a developer, running different types of projects since 1999, and I am a certified PMP, which is project management professional. If you've been in the earlier sessions, Rob's kind of gone into a little bit about what the certification is for PMP, and I've been a PMP since 2004. I also got my Scrum Master certification in 2018, so this is one of the Agile frameworks that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this session. And then I was an adjunct professor teaching project management at First Salva University for about 4 years, from 2011 to 2014. Breathe. Okay, so I've been a little bit busy and I spent a lot of time in project management. So this is one of the reasons why I'm kind of brought into this session and help talk about project management and get people excited about it. I am certainly very enthusiastic about project management. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about what we're going to get into, which is project management models. As I said, it's probably a concept that everybody's very familiar with. You just may not know it, and you may not know it by this name. But basically, by definition, what is a project management model? It is a system of practices, techniques, procedures, and rules for completing a project. It basically gives you a master plan. It is a blueprint for how are you going to plan a project. At its highest level, it gives you that commonality, those rules for engagement that give you that common language. So that's really the benefits and why we use models. So really, when we look at what do models provide, it's the basis is that common language. Once we decide what type of model we're going to be using, we can talk the same language. We have the same expectations of how a program or project is going to run. We know what kind of steps, we know the rules of engagement, we kind of know what practices we're going to be using. We may not know the specifics, but we have a language that we can use, a blueprint for how that project is going to run. It's an overall plan for that project. So one of the things we're going to talk about is waterfall, and a lot of people are kind of familiar with the basics of what waterfall is. So as soon as I say this is going to be a waterfall project, you probably get an image in your mind of how this project is going to run. That it's going to be maybe a very linear set of steps. We're going to have some kind of analysis. Then we're going to have some sign off, go into some design, have some sign off, go into an implementation. You kind of get the idea of how this is going to flow. And everybody on that project now has those kind of rules of engagement on flowing through the different steps as you proceed through the project. So it gives you that alignment. That's what models provide. So I know in the last couple sessions, Rob tended to use construction or buildings as an analogy. And I'm going to kind of keep going with that because I think it's very easy to talk about building a house because a lot of people can relate to that. You basically think of building a foundation and building frameworks and installing the electrical and the plumbing and the sheetrock and the painting and finishing it off. So we can relate to that. So a lot of my examples are going to keep flowing with the construction idea. So if we're talking about models, let's think for a moment about the construction models and what the differences are in the terms of the definitions, the process, and the rules of engagement that come to mind if I think about different types of construction. So if soon as I talk about I'm going to build a condominium versus a single-story ranch, versus a 2-story colonial, versus a commercial office building, you get an idea of some of those terms or some of those processes that are going to be different between those types of construction. And that's the same thing that happens in a project model. So if I'm dealing with condominiums, I'm certainly going to think about different processes than if I'm doing a commercial office building. I don't know yet what the specifics might be. I'm not even talking about, is it, a large condominium with 100 units versus a, small commercial office building that's just got a couple offices. I'm just talking about the process. I'm kind of thinking if I'm doing a residential building versus a commercial building, there's probably some different rules of engagement. There's different conversations that are happening. So there's different models, there's different alignment of expectations that you start thinking about as soon as you start hearing about these different models. Does that kind of help bring these concepts of models to bear? Do you start trying to think of how it helps bringing that terminology easier? Okay, I'm going to assume this side has thumbs up because I can't see you. Yes.
I would say, yeah, I would say for the most part, yes, but that's because like I'm thinking like Agile, I know you're using probably software development versus maybe traditional spaces you'll use Waterfall or iterative. So I just don't know if other people know that. So you might want to, well, maybe I'll just give an example as you go through it on what models to use with which types.
Okay, so those are kind of the models that we're going to go through. So the differences between Waterfall, iterative, and Agile are what we're going to concentrate on next. So this is the concept, the definition of model. Now we're going to go through the specific examples to kind of understand what is a waterfall model, what is an iterative model, what is an agile model, and we'll talk about what are some differences there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I don't know if other people understood, so I figured it might be good to clarify a bit. Thank you.
Okay. Are there other questions? Okay, so I'm going to jump right into project management model. Oops, nope, I jumped the wrong way. Waterfall. All right, so there are a lot of different models, and you would actually be surprised at how many different variations we have in project management models. So I guess contemporary project management has been around since ancient times. They can actually track it back down to the pyramids. But if we talk about traditional contemporary project management, history really started back in the 1950s, 1960s. So if you can kind of track that through its history, the amount of project models, they're huge. A lot of them are just different variations that people have learned along the way that really trigger off of these main three. So we're really going to talk about waterfall, iterative, and agile. Once you understand these three, you'll see that most things are just a different variation of one of these models. So again, the model gives you the terminology, the processes, and the rules of engagement. So that once you say this is a waterfall project or this is an agile project, you have an understanding of how the projects are going to work. You're also going to start understanding how your project is going to fit into the model so that you're choosing the right model to fit your project, because not every project fits every model. And there really should be an understanding of the project and the model so that they fit together. People that have tried to, a lot of times, kind of recently, the trend has been to do everything agile. And when you try to do a project that really isn't an agile project in an agile model, it's kind of like fitting a, square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't quite fit. So you want it, once you understand models and you understand your project, you have to try fitting the two together. So let's start with waterfall. Most people that have worked on project, whether you've been the project manager, you have been the business analyst, you've been the developer, if you have ever worked on a project, you have probably worked in some version of waterfall. It is the original model. And basically it works very similar to a actual. It flows in one direction and it cascades through the different stages. So basically what you're looking at is you go in a linear fashion from one phase, which, you know, it could be your initiate phase or your analysis phase or some sort of starting gate. You have agreement or sign off or completion of that phase. Then you go to the next phase. It may be a design phase. And that is completed. There's sign off. And then you go to the next phase. It could be execution, implementation. When that's completed, you go to the next phase. And it is possible to have changes that affect the phase before it. But kind of like a rapidly running nature waterfall, there's hurdles and it's difficult to go upstream. And unless you're a salmon, there's a lot of things that you have to jump through to try to get back upstream. There are processes in place to do this process. This model does not make it easy. It's really based on trying to go from one phase to sign off, complete that, go to the next. Not necessarily today, but I know when I first started my career, I was working on a Department of Defense subcontractor. This is what we did. And I think that still applies, maybe not as strictly, but a lot to DoD type of projects where you will see that kind of strict sign off on each phase. And yes, there's change management where you can go upstream, but a lot of times you're looking at trying to get that kind of secure sign off before you go into the next phase. I also saw this a lot when I was working at GTEC because we were bidding on contracts. So before we even got the project, we were going after particular proposals where a customer was saying, this is what I'm looking for. Provide me your response or your proposal for this contract, which included all the requirements, the budget, the time frame, and everything was kind of signed off on if you won that contract. So it was really hard to go back and negotiate that. So you really kind of flowed from that signed contract to the next phase. So it really followed this waterfall concept of having replying to the bid, getting the contract, implementing the contract, and then having sign off. You do still find this kind of strict waterfall concept in some places today, but there are a lot of variations on this that allow you to kind of flow upstream a little bit easier. All right. Because of that strict nature of trying to go upstream, over the time, people have found that it's more important to try to, I wouldn't say more important, I'm sorry. A lot of times you need to be able to kind of iterate through that. By the time you're implementing something, you may find things in the design that you should have been able to go back and change, that if you wait till the end, it's more costly. So one of the other models is called iterative. A lot of people say that iterative is just a variation. Some say improvement to the waterfall model. One of the important things about the iterative model is that you do have a single planning phase or initiation phase and a single deployment, but you kind of spin or iterate through a design and implementation and testing phase. A lot of times this has to do with feature by feature or setting milestones so that you can kind of check your progress throughout your development or throughout your project. So you kind of, everybody agrees and signs off on what is the scope, what is the purpose of this project, what is it we're going to develop, and then you can kind of take one feature at a time or a period of time or some kind of set of activities and break it out into measurable milestones where you can check your progress. You can actually go through your design, your implementation, your testing, make sure everything looks good, because if you get to the testing of maybe a month, 2 months, 3 months, and go back and test that and you find problems, it's easier and cheaper to fix that there than waiting till the end of your project, which may be 9 months, a year, 2 years long. So you're also able to show your sponsors, your management, your customers that you're making progress along the way. So you can start having people look at different pieces. And it also allows you to measure your progress along the way. So instead of waiting a year into the program when you should be ready for testing and find that you're behind schedule, you have these manageable milestones each iteration to say, are we still on target? Did we meet the milestone that we thought we were going to be at, to make sure that we're on time, that we're on quality, on scope, all of those same things for projects for each iteration. This is much more typical of what you're going to see in a lot of companies. I know when I, running programs at FM Global, this is definitely what we did. We would break every large project into measurable milestones, 2 or 3 months, so that we could make sure that we're on target, so that there's no really surprises at the end. You're dealing with testing and dealing with progress as you're going along. Any questions on these two? Great. Now we get into the real different one. So we want to kind of talk, because Agile is not just a different model. Agile is really a different mindset. So a lot of people think Agile is kind of new. It actually was first published in 1986, and it came out of what's called the Agile Manifesto. So these 4 lines is really what the basis of Agile Manifesto. Well, this is the Agile Manifesto. This is the basis of Agile. So they're really concentrating on individuals and interactions over process. Basically means that talking to people, talking as a team, working together in collaboration is more important than worrying about what kind of processes are being used in the throughout the development. That working software is more important than documentation. This does not say no documentation. It just says that our working software is valued over documentation. That collaborating with the customer is valued over contract negotiations. We're not going to worry so much about signing on the dotted line. We're about collaboration, communication, talking with people. And that responding to change is valued over the plan. So these 4 things are kind of what are the core, but that led to 12 principles of the Agile Development Guide. I didn't include those. There is a link at the end if you're interested in the 12 principles, but that is really what drives Agile development. So this is a total shift in mindset. So if I think back to a construction example, so if I look at Waterfall, I'm basically looking at things like, I'm going to work with the customer to figure out what they want in a 2-story colonial. Sign off on everything. Then we're going to go off and develop our blueprints for their 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, attached garage house. Then they're going to go off. We're going to build it. They're going to come back. We're going to get all of the inspections done. We're going to do a walkthrough, and then we're going to go to the closing. So every step, there's kind of a sign off, but we do it and they move on to the next step. Iterative is more like we start talking about what we want, we plan the 2-story colonial, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Then when we start going into the design phase, we start looking at what the first floor and the second floor want to look like. Then later we can add the garage. As we're starting to construct, we may look at doing inspections for the plumbing while the walls are still open. We may get our electrical inspections in there because we're iteratively looking at things and not just doing our inspections or testing at the end. And then at the end, we'll do our closing. So that middle piece is about developing, implementing, and testing different pieces all at the same time. Now, the mindset of Agile might start thinking about, I'm not sure I want a colonial. I know I need something that's going to protect me from the weather and the sun. Okay, we can do a lean-to and we can get that out to you in a couple hours. And then we're going to loop that back and see what gets better. Make changes and provide more value. So then after that first iteration, might come back and go, okay, the lean-to worked, it was protected from the rain, but when the wind blew, it blew everything over. So the next iteration might look at a cement slab where we could attach a wood frame to make it more sturdy and be more supportive. So it's building upon each iteration as we go. You may still end up getting to the colonial with the 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, or you may get to something less that still meets your needs or somewhere in between. But it's a different mindset. It's not going in knowing exactly what you're going to end up with. It looks at a customer's needs. It can be complicated, and it takes a long time to change that mindset. One of the main concepts with Agile is that it's delivering small increments of business value. So it's not just small sprints. You're not like iterative where you're just breaking your whole deliverable up into smaller chunks so you can test progress, you can measure progress. Agile is about increasing business value along the way with each iteration so that you are building on that feedback, and each increment is increasing your business value. But each sprint in itself has a design, a plan, a design, build, test, review, and launch. So another difference between this and the iterative, where iterative had one planning phase, one initiative, and one deployment. Agile, every sprint, you plan, you design, and you launch. It does not necessarily have to go out to customer, but it has to be something that you could launch because it has value. It has increased business value. Is this making sense? Any questions where I am right now with Agile? All right, hopefully I'm not confusing you more. Yes.
Sounds good so far.
Thank you. All right. So one of the myths that I do want to kind of talk about is that a lot of people, when they hear or first try Agile, they think Agile programs can't be planned, they can't be budgeted, they kind of run forever until something is agreed upon. A lot of times that's not true. Agile can be run in a corporate environment where you have specific customer requirements and needs and budgeting requirements. The things you need to understand about the Agile sprints, that is the execution phase. So as we're especially in the next sessions, the next two coming up, when we're talking about the phases of a project. And I think we've talked a little bit about it, where you kind of initiate something and then you're going to actually execute and implement it. That's the sprints that we were just talking about. So that whole, and I'm going to go backwards for just a minute, down at the bottom, those little loops of the plan, design, build, test, review, launch, that is your execution for Agile. There is a whole nother phase that comes before that. So you're initiating an Agile project with an idea of what is its vision. It has a product backlog, which are things that you want to do that lead up to the minimal viable product, MVP. What is the smallest thing or the minimal amount of business value that we can deliver and still have something that is of value? Then we build that into one of our sprints. We still have to be able to hold to some sort of budget and timeline, because at the end of this, we are still delivering to a customer. So that still holds in Agile development. A lot of people talk about those sprints. That is the executable phase. We still have the planning. We still have a final release. That's the full model. All right. So that's models. Models were that blueprint. It gives you that language to talk about. There's another concept that's very, very closely related that I thought I would kind of touch on as well, called the frameworks. So frameworks are a prescription of what needs to be done in that model or in that project. Kind of takes it to the next level. What frameworks don't do is tell you how to do something, and it specifically does not tell you how to do it successfully. That is really what you get out of training and experience. So how to take something like, and we're going to be talking about it a lot through these sessions, is, project management institutes, their PMBOK, which is the project management body of knowledge. How do they set up their framework? What processes are included? Practices are included? Great information on what needs to be done to run a project, but it still does not tell you how to do it. Some of the differences is it's going to tell you that you need to have a communication plan. It's going to tell you that you need to work with your stakeholders. It's going to tell you need to identify risk. It is not going to tell you, for your type of project or for your industry, how do you identify risk? How do you rate your risk so that you can be successful in your project? That is something that's going to come through experience. It's going to come through training. It's going to come through mentorship. So neither models nor frames tell you the hows, but only the whats. So framework, as if you recall, the models, like I said, are the practices, techniques, procedures, and rules for engagement. It's the blueprint. Framework provides you with what tasks, processes, and templates to implement projects. So it takes it one step further. So it can even tell you, it can even give you templates for what should a project charter look like. It can give you a template for what should a wrap sheet look like. It can still tell you the what's, but you still need the information on how to fill out that information to be successful for your project. But it's another step further. It's giving you tools to implement your project. So like anything else, let's bring it to a construction example. So the model maybe tell you you've got an analysis phase, you've got a design phase, construction phase, inspections, and close. The framework is going to start telling you that you need to make sure that you have a requirement on the number and types of rooms. Still not going to tell you how to collect that, where you need to put it, how to put it in a blueprint. It's going to tell you need a blueprint, but not how to create a blueprint or how to get that improved. It's going to tell you need electrical inspection, a foundation inspection, a certificate of occupancy. But that framework is still not going to explain that how to get an electrical inspection passed. All right, hopefully I have drilled that in enough. So there's a lot of different frameworks out there based on your model. Like I said, in this series, we will be talking a lot about the Project Management Institute framework. It's the PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge. This is mostly developed for the waterfall model. It can be adapted for an iterative model. But there are others out there. You can certainly look up the Prince2, the CMMI, or the ITIL models, and it gives you a framework for a waterfall model. For Agile frameworks, some of the more common ones are Scrum, Kanban, or XP, which is for extreme programming. Scrum is one of the probably more popular, which is very prescriptive on how to run an Agile Scrum project. Kanban, I think, is gaining a lot of popularity these days. SAFe, which is Scaled Agile Framework, is based on Scrum, but what it is really Agile's response to enterprise level Agile development. So one of the original concerns / complaints about Agile is that it does not scale. It works for small teams. SAFe is that response saying, how do you scale from one small development team to an enterprise level, multiple applications that are dependent, that have to work together. So it's its own framework for Agile development.
Denise, may I interrupt you a moment, please?
Yes.
I know we're getting to like the Q&A portion, but Monica Mandeville had asked, I've noticed the sprints for Agile are typically a specific time frame, i.e. 2-week sprints. However, in my small team, we've adjusted our sprints, perhaps milestones is a better term, depending on the work required. So one sprint may look like 1 week, but another maybe 2.5 weeks. Is that against best practice?
It is not against practice for Agile. Whoops. It is against practice for Scrum. And that's the difference in the framework. So if you just are an Agile model, you can't, or hybrid. So I do run a lot of my projects so that they are hybrid, where we are running sprints, but it's almost like an Agile iterative hybrid, where we come in with an initiate and design, but then run very Scrum sprints where we do keep things like deliverables, not just milestones. And then there's a final deliverable. So if it's just iterative, where you're running small development cycles in order to maintain that you're making progress, that is iterative. Your milestones can be anything you need it to be to measure progress or test features. If it's hybrid, where those are Agile sprints, the key is, are you delivering business value? That could easily go out to a customer. For Agile framework, your sprint can be anything that you need it to be that's value. For Scrum again is very prescriptive, and they'll tell you exactly what to run, and Scrum tells you pick a cadence of 2 or 4 weeks, and every sprint has to be 2 to 4 weeks, because that's what you can count on. Okay. A lot of information in that answer, sorry. It's tough. All right, so I was just getting one more slide just to sum everything up. So basically, we were talking about project management models. It is a system of practices, techniques, procedures, and rules for planning a project. The model provides you that high-level common language and alignment of your expectations. It is the blueprint that allows everybody to know what to expect on how you're running the project. Hopefully I did a good job of explaining what the waterfall, iterative, and agile methods are, what those models are, and some of the differences. And also looked at the difference between the model and the framework and how they work together, where the framework is more on the what you do at the particular project level. So by understanding the models, you and your project, you can pick the right model for your project. I did include a couple resources, a lot on the Agile. I think this session kind of came together based on some questions that some of the participants in previous sessions had asked specifically around Agile. So I did include quite a bit of the Agile resources. Project Management Institute is also included in here. If you want to go and look at more information. Thank you, and questions.
Yes, thank you so much. There are some questions I will share, and if other people have questions they'd like to ask out. Pedro had asked, in what scenarios does Waterfall still hold value over the others, or would Waterfall be preferable?
So I do know if it's a very strict process. I know DoD, as far as I am aware, still would be one of those areas where you will see it. I believe some areas in DoD and subcontractors have gone to an Agile format, but the last time I worked on DoD projects, they were still very waterfall. And like I said, the other place I've seen it is when it was when you're responding to a bidded contract. So most of the requirements were done prior to even it becoming a project, and you already had sign off on the requirements and the plan before you could go into implementation. So you were responding to a bid.
Okay. The other that's listed right now, I'm going to ask if he would kind of address it. So Pepe Lopez, he wrote, I'd like to clarify at the end of the presentation a few terms that have been used interchangeably, and I feel this interchangeability could introduce some confusion.
Okay.
So Pepe, do you want to kind of address what you're referring to?
Yes, absolutely. And first of all, thank you, Denise, for the presentation. No, I think that just to avoid confusion, the Agile Manifesto was published in 2001, number 1. The Scrum, or the new product development, a seminal paper by Takeuchi Inonaka, it was in 1986. The other thing that it was confusing is you kept referring as sprints in Agile, and I just like to see if you could sort of like clarify that the sprints are in their frame Scrum, but as you indicated earlier, Agile is more of a mindset. So I'd like to know if you could shed light on that, share some insights.
Okay, so in my understanding, Agile is a model, but is a shift in mindset. So it's not just a different model, but it is a different way of thinking. So when you go from waterfall to an iterative, it's an easier shift because most of the processes are the same. The typical PMBOK still works for both. Agile is a different mindset where you're not thinking of so much that end product, but you're thinking of the MVP. So it a lot of times is that shift in mindset of thinking of business value, thinking of small iterations of business value. So it is still a model. The framework being Scrum or XP or Kanban, or which style of Scrum, because Scrum is a umbrella of different types of development, Scrum being one of them. So Agile is that umbrella or that model where the framework is one of those other choices, where Scrum is one of the more popular ones, I believe, or the trend, and that's very prescriptive of how to run a Scrum project under an Agile model. Does that clarify? Did that help answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I just wanted to sort of, to me, the confusing part is the Agile Manifesto doesn't mention anything about sprints, and I just wanted to sort of.
No, the manifesto does not talk about
sort of,
sprints. Sprints are part of the response on how to satisfy, more on the principles than the manifesto itself.
Sure. That is all, right? So that it could, one can walk away with like, oh, I'm going to practice Agile and I'm going to do sprints, and that's inaccurate.
Correct.
Because you could practice Agile and do Kanban or Lean or something else, and that is all.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions that people may have? There are none other in the chat box. No, a very quiet crowd, Denise. You've stunned and overwhelmed, perhaps.
I hope it helps people understand. I hope it was an interesting topic that you can bring back to your organization. I hope it wasn't too much.
No, I think it was great, and thank you so much for putting this time into the presentation. We very much appreciate it, and we look forward, as I said earlier in the presentation, Steve Earle will be presenting on moving from concepts to the concrete on August 12th, and Natalie Benkovich on August 26th for an overview of project management knowledge areas. I see that Monica Mandeville has her hand up.
Hi, how are you? Thank you. I wanted to thank you very much, Denise, for your presentation. It was really great. I have actually an additional question about Agile because I'm really interested in it. And I think my team is kind of doing this, but we've been doing it more in a very natural, flowy way. We're just a small team and we're kind of a newer team. So my question for you is, you mentioned something about this SAFE framework. And I'd like to learn more about it because you're saying that it's in response to the Agile level development. How is it different? Like how does it kind of work that's different than Scrum and Kanban that I have a little bit of understanding about, so that it is a little bit more flexible for these larger development groups?
I believe it's safe.org is the best place to get the information. I have not been certified in SAFE yet, so I have a base working understanding of the concepts and have introduced it at the lowest level. So there's 4 levels, kind of like, I believe there's team, there's a middle one, I think, and I don't know, it goes all the way up to enterprise. I believe there's 4 levels. Like I said, I have a base level. I'm not going to try to claim I'm the SAFE guru. But they have a website, safe. I believe it's org, that goes into the terminology, the explanation, the organization of it. But it starts bringing together multiple Scrum teams so that they can figure out how to work together, especially when you have applications that have dependencies or applications that even have dependencies on infrastructure, so that you start building release trains together, or too much terminology for me to get off the top of my head right now, but dependencies on one another. So you start working not just in your one team, but how do you start coordinating at higher levels? So I would definitely start going to that site and start looking. It's not that it's overly complicated, but there's a lot to it, especially as you're going up into the enterprise levels. But they have really figured out a lot of that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. Daniel Indish asks, is there there is such a difference in terms between software technical development versus manufacturing terms like Kanban. Is there some way to compare, contrast these terms?
Kanban is used everywhere. Actually, we do use it a lot in software, especially when it comes to like a production support or any type of services. So I personally I work in what is mostly a hardware company, and I certainly find that there's a lot of differences between hardware and software terminology. Not necessarily when it comes to project management and the processes that we use, but we use different processes, but I don't think we necessarily, I find that we have different terms for the same process. I think we have to, so what am I trying to say? Something like PMI is industry agnostic. They don't care whether you're manufacturing, software, construction, the processes and what you want to do to run programs and projects should be the same regardless of what your industry is. If you've not looked into something like the PMBOK, you should find that it doesn't matter if it's IT or manufacturing. Those processes are something that should be used across the board.
Super, thank you. For those of you too who are interested in Agile, Tech Collective does host the Agile RI group. So they meet every month. Their next meeting, they're taking off a little summer hiatus, but their next meeting is September 15th at 6 p.m. It's on exposing uncomfortable topics, errors and omissions with scaling. But that's a great group that if you're interested in Agile or using Agile, looking for support in your workplace or thinking about making a transition, they're a wealth of knowledge and are always happy to have more folks join them. So you can check, to our website for all of those upcoming events as well. And I think, yep, Creusa just posted that link in the chat box. So for those of you who want to make it really nice and easy, you can just click, be registered, and have something on your social calendars for September. But I'd like to thank you all certainly for attending, to Denise for volunteering, giving of her time so generously to give us this information, and to Creusa who manages to keep us all up and running and having things like this, because if you were relying on me for all your technical information, we'd be attached by shoestrings and yogurt cups. So I thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again on August 12th for Steve's presentation. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Denise.
Thank you.
Thank you.